Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're heading back to ancient Judea.
Back in time we go.
We're going to explore the life and times of Herod the Great. But, we're not just dusting off any old history book for this one.
No,
We've got something special.
absolutely.
Zora Neale Hurston's The Life of Herod the Great, it's newly published.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read, even if you think you know the story, say, from Josephus.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most people know a little bit about Herod, right?
Right, the basics.
But Hurston, she's famous for her novels, her folklore, and she really brings a different perspective.
Well, she really does.
Yeah.
It's like she brings Herod to life.
Yeah.
Not just dates and battles.
Speaking of battles, I bet there were some pretty epic ones back then.
Oh, yeah, worthy of, a Game of Thrones episode.
Totally. But what I find interesting is how she focuses on the man himself.
Yeah, she really paints this picture of him.
Yeah, and he's not just some, distant king.
No, not at all. She describes him. He was tall, athletic, over 6 feet.
Really?
Yeah. And people said he was incredibly charming, almost like an ancient world celebrity.
Wow. That's so different from, the usual image you get of a powerful ruler.
Right. It makes you think, was this genuine or, a calculated move?
Yeah, was that charm a tool to gain power?
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about Hurston's approach. She dives into, his upbringing, his education. Because remember, he wasn't born into all this.
Right. He had to, work his way up.
Exactly. And it's easy to get lost, with all the Herods running around.
Oh, yeah, sons, grandsons, all named Herod.
Right. So Hurston's really careful about that, distinguishing Herod the Great from the rest. And I think that's crucial because their motivations might have been very different.
Oh, for sure. So, okay, let's set the scene. Judea, 1st century BC. It's a complicated time.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got religious factions like the Pharisees coming up, Greek influence everywhere.
And don't forget, the great synagogue at Jamnia is trying to, solidify Jewish tradition.
Right. So for Herod, it's not just about ruling. It's about ruling in the middle of all this change.
Yeah, like a society figuring itself out.
Exactly. Did he go with the flow or resist it?
Well, she points to his early days as governor of Galilee, a region, by the way, that was overrun with bandits.
Oh, like the Wild West or something?
Kinda, yeah. And there was this notorious bandit leader, Hezekiah. A real problem for Rome.
So it's like, okay, Herod, show us what you got. Can you handle this?
Exactly. Sink or swim time. And she describes this amazing campaign against Hezekiah.
Like a real test.
Yeah. And Herod pulls off this incredible victory, like a total David and Goliath story. He comes back to Galilee a hero.
Parades, I bet. Celebrations.
Oh, totally. And Hurston doesn't shy away from the politics behind it all either, like how Herod used this win to get in good with the Romans.
Makes sense, right? Got to keep your backers happy.
Exactly. Prove your worth. But all this success, well, not everyone was thrilled about it.
I can imagine. Jealousy.
Yeah.
Right. Especially from the Jewish elite.
Right on. Hyrcanus, the high priest, and the Sanhedrin, they saw Herod as a threat.
Becoming too powerful.
Yeah, and too Romanized. And that's where things get really interesting.
Because they can't exactly take him on in a fight, can they?
Nope. So they come up with this plot. They accuse Herod of murder using the families of those bandits he defeated.
Oh, wow. That's cold.
Yeah. And Hurston really makes this trial come alive. You can feel the tension. Herod walks in, surrounded by guards. The high priest is so scared he actually faints.
No way.
It's a total power move.
High stakes. But, there's that story about Sameas, this wise teacher, prophesying that Herod would become incredibly powerful.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's almost like this whole trial is, fulfilling that prophecy.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did that prediction shape how Herod saw himself?
Right. Did it give him that extra confidence?
Exactly. And we can't talk about Herod's rise without mentioning Rome.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Roman politics were a mess back then.
Total mess.
Wow.
You've got Caesar on the rise, his rivalry with Pompey, powerful figures like Sextus Caesar.
Oh, yeah, governor of Syria.
And Mark Antony, who'd later be super important to Herod. It was a lot to handle.
So how did he manage all that?
He was like a master chess player. Hurston talks about how Herod used everything to his advantage. His Roman citizenship, his smarts, his military skills. He knew the game, even down to the, shall we say, the gift giving.
Gift giving? Is that what they called it back then?
That's one way to put it. It was basically standard practice in Roman politics.
Oh, you mean like bribery?
Essentially. She even tells this story about Sextus Caesar. Apparently, he was over the moon with a gift of like a talent of gold from Herod.
Wow. So even as a client king, he was working the system.
Oh, absolutely. But he was also a man, not just a politician. What about his personal life?
Yeah, his relationships.
Well, things get complicated there. He had this arranged marriage to Doris, but Hurston makes it clear that he wasn't really into it. His real love, his passion, was for Mariamne, Hyrcanus's granddaughter.
Wait, hold on. The granddaughter of the guy who was trying to take him down?
Yep. That's Herod for you?
That's a whole other level of complicated.
Right. And this love affair, it'll have huge consequences, both for Herod personally and for Judea's future. But to get to that, we need to head east towards the Parthian Empire.
Okay, so we've got political intrigue, forbidden romance, and a powerful enemy looming. This is getting good. The Parthians, huh? They were a big deal back then, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. A major power in the east. Always kind of poking at the Romans.
And this is where things get really tricky for Herod, right? He's trying to, establish his rule, and suddenly, boom.
It wasn't just a border skirmish either. I mean, their arrival threw Judea into chaos.
So now he's fighting on, what, two fronts? Enemies within and this huge external threat.
Exactly. It put a lot of strain on everything, especially his relationships, even within his own family.
Oh, I bet. That kind of pressure can really, expose those cracks.
Right. And Hurston points out something really interesting. Herod's brother, Physaelus, he actually had some sympathy for the Parthians.
Really? Why?
He thought negotiation was the way to go, not war. He believed they could work something out.
So it's brother against brother, each with a totally different vision for Judea's future.
And it wasn't just a difference of opinion either. Physaelus, along with Hyrcanus, they went to Galilee, supposedly for peace talks with the Parthians.
Oh, no, that sounds like a setup.
Herod warned him, He thought it was a trap. He said, don't go, they'll betray you.
He knew the Parthians couldn't be trusted.
Exactly. And guess what? He was right. They captured them, broke their word, and installed Antigonus as their puppet king.
Antigonus? Wait, the one Herod defeated before?
Yep, that's the one. Back for revenge with the Parthians backing him up.
Oh, man. Talk about a bad situation. So what does Herod do?
He makes a run for it. He knew he couldn't win right then, so he escapes Jerusalem with his family and his supporters.
This is that whole nighttime journey Hurston describes, right? With the virgins.
That's right. He was trying to protect them, didn't want them handed over to the Parthians as part of the deal.
So it wasn't just about saving himself.
Nope. There was a rescue mission involved. It shows a different side to him, I think.
Yeah, it does. It's like he's not just a cold, calculating politician.
Right. And Hurston doesn't sugarcoat it either. It was a tough journey, dangerous. People got hurt. They're traveling through enemy territory.
Mistakes.
And then there's Physaelus.
Oh, yeah. What happened to him?
Still a prisoner. And he knew it was over. The Parthians weren't going to keep any promises.
So Antigonus was going to, have him executed?
Something like that. Anyway, Physaelus chose to take his own life rather than face whatever Antigonus had planned.
Wow. That must have been a huge blow to Herod.
Oh, absolutely. He loses his brother, his kingdom is in the hands of his enemy, and he's basically a fugitive.
So what now? Does he just give up?
Herod. Never. He heads straight to Rome.
Makes sense. That's where the real power is.
Right. He goes before the Senate, lays out his case. Look, I'm loyal to Rome. Antigonus is a problem. The Parthians are a problem. Help me get back in charge and I'll take care of it.
So he's offering a solution. Let me be your guy in Judea.
Exactly. And it works. Antony and Octavius, the future Augustus, they saw his value.
They knew a good deal when they heard it, I guess.
They also knew Herod's record. He'd proven himself effective before, so the Senate declares him king of Judea.
Wow. What a comeback.
But it's not over yet. He's got to get back to Judea, take back control. And Jerusalem, that's still in Antigonus's hands.
So another showdown. Who wins this time?
Well, as you know, Herod wins, takes back Jerusalem, and Antigonus is,
executed.
Yeah, that's how it goes in those days. But even with Antigonus gone, holding on to power in Judea, that's no easy feat.
Yeah, I can imagine. There must have been a lot of people who still supported the old regime.
Oh, for sure. The threat of rebellion was always there. But Herod, he meets those challenges head on, starts these huge building projects. The biggest one being the expansion of the Second Temple.
The temple in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
The one from the Gospels.
The one and only. And Hurston describes Herod's vision for this renovation. It was massive, impressive, not just about religious devotion, but about showing his power, making the Jewish people happy, and solidifying his legitimacy.
So it's like architecture is a power move.
Exactly. And she really emphasizes how grand this project was. But while he's doing all this, his personal life Well, it's a mess.
Oh yeah, Miriam. That's right. Things were already complicated there.
And they get even worse. They had 2 sons, but Herod, he's always afraid of plots and conspiracies.
He doesn't exactly trust people easily, does he?
Not really. And he starts to get suspicious of Mariamne.
Because of her family.
Partly. But Hurston also mentions how other people, like his sister Salome and his brother Pheroras, they're whispering in his ear, feeding his paranoia.
Not helping the situation at all.
Nope. Toxic environment all around. Power struggles, family drama. It's a recipe for disaster.
And it all leads to, well, a tragedy. He has Mariamne executed.
It's a turning point in the book, a real heartbreak. Even after she's gone, the rumors keep going, the accusations. It casts a shadow over everything.
It's like a Shakespearean tragedy. A powerful king, destroyed by his own fears, loses the one person he truly loved.
Exactly. And it doesn't end there. We know that his sons by Mariamne meet tragic ends as well. But before we get to that, I think it's worth pausing and reflecting on what we've learned so far.
You know, it's amazing to think after all this time, like 2,000 years, we're still talking about Herod.
It really is. I mean, he left behind these incredible buildings, expanded trade, brought a period of peace, relatively speaking. But then there's the other side of the coin.
The brutality, the cost of all that achievement.
Yeah, and I think that's what keeps us fascinated, that duality, Brilliant strategist, ambitious builder, but also capable of such cruelty.
And maybe that's what drew Hurston to him in the first place. What do you think? Was he more of a tragic figure to her or a straight-up villain?
Well, she doesn't shy away from the darker parts of his actions, but she also wants us to see him in context,
Right, it was a different time.
A very different time. Power wasn't exactly maintained through gentle means back then.
Yeah, no kidding. I guess what you're saying is we can acknowledge the bad stuff without, condoning it.
Exactly. Understanding the times, the constant threat of war, the pressure to stay in power, it all plays a part.
And then there's Josephus, right, our main source for a lot of this. He wasn't exactly a fan of Herod.
Not at all. Came from a priestly family that opposed him, so there's definitely some bias there.
Hurston even calls him a poison source, which I kind of love,
I too.
It's a good reminder that history is always told from a certain angle, shaped by the writer, their beliefs, their background.
Totally. And that's why Hurston's book is so interesting. She brings in other voices, like Nicholas of Damascus, Herod's advisor and historian.
Oh, right. His version of things is much more positive.
Way more sympathetic. Focuses on Herod's accomplishments, his efforts to improve things for the people.
It's a good reminder that there are always different sides to the story. And we have to, figure out what we think based on all the information.
Absolutely. Be critical thinkers, right?
Totally. What I found really interesting about the book was how she connects Herod's personal struggles to these bigger ideas, cultural change, the dynamics of power.
It makes his story relevant even today.
Right. I mean, we're still dealing with those same things, aren't we? Trying to balance tradition and progress, figuring out how to use power responsibly.
And dealing with a world where cultures clash.
It's like Herod's story, the way Hurston tells it, it becomes this reflection of our own struggles. With ambition, with compromise, with the whole good versus evil thing.
Exactly. It's a story that stays with you.
So, for those of you listening, what do you take away from all this? I think it's a reminder that history is about more than just the facts, right?
Right. It's about people.
It's about the choices they make, the consequences that follow, and how those ripple through time.
And it's about questioning the sources, looking for different perspectives, trying to get a fuller picture.
As you dive deeper into Hurston's book, ask yourself, what resonates with me? Was Herod ultimately a positive force or a negative one?
How does his story connect to what we're facing today?
Keep those questions in mind. There's always something more to uncover, something more to learn. And, maybe you'll even learn a little something about yourself along the way.
I think that's the magic of these deep dives, isn't it?
It is. It's all about sparking that curiosity, getting people excited to learn more.
And there's always more to explore.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll be back with more fascinating stories soon. Until then, happy exploring.